Let me be very clear. There will not be a multinational peacekeeping force in Ukraine because the bill for that would be enormous. And from a political perspective, it means that if you're peacekeeping, you have to have the ability to enforce the peace. And peace enforcement means that you have to be in a position to attack whichever side breaks the agreement. And that would almost certainly be the Russians. And you would have to then be prepared politically to attack them as for breaking any peace agreement. That isn't going to happen. And therefore, what we'd get into is something that would be a presence with a trigger force that acts as a deterrent for the Russians coming in, because there'd be the threat of an awful lot more happening. And that would see, I think the realistic outline would be troops on the ground in the west of Ukraine, probably from the UK, France, and Germany, providing an enhanced training role for conscripts who've been called up to join the Ukrainian military to go through their basic military training in country before they go forward into their different units and formations. It would also provide logistic support so that equipment that the Ukrainians own could be prepared, but could be repaired by Western militaries so that they can be sent back to the front line again freeing Ukrainian personnel up to go and become the frontline troops. And of course, as you mentioned, the ability to do some air policing, whether that would be with aircraft stationed inside Ukraine. I think the risk initially would be assessed as too high, but certainly it's within easy flying distance of countries that surround Ukraine, and air policing can be provided from there. And this is where the Americans provide a lot of capability. They don't necessarily need to put troops on the ground, but it's the big transport aircraft to be able to get stuff in and out. It's the extensive air force that they've got, from the airborne command and control capability, from their airborne intelligence collection capabilities, down to their fighters and bombers that they can use as part of a deterrence force. And again, of course, we mustn't forget the maritime flank, the Black Sea, because there's a lot of effort that's going to be needed there to help demine large proportions of that, to provide more secure passages for Ukrainian shipping to get Ukrainian grain out through the Black Sea without the threat of interference from Russian forces, even though the Russian Black Sea fleet has effectively been decimated by Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't have a navy. You have to remember that Ukraine has currently got a security agreement that includes the United States and the United Kingdom in making sure that Ukraine's territories pre-2014 are guaranteed. The Russians are also signatories to it, and that's the Budapest Memorandum. And of course, that isn't worth the paper it's been written on, because Russia invaded, and the West, in particular the United States and the United Kingdom, did not stand up and push Russia back again. So it's difficult to assess what security guarantees there would be. There's been some interesting language, a NATO Article 5 type agreement. That's recognizing that Ukraine would not become a member of NATO. NATO's rules don't allow it to become a member when it's in active conflict anyway, and it hasn't passed through all the hoops it would need to get membership. But an Article 5 type agreement after the peace agreement, any peace agreement would suggest an attack on Ukraine would be considered an attack on all the signatories of the agreement, and therefore we would deal with, they would go in and deal with that. That's the coalition of the willing. But what dealing with that would look like, nobody has really sat down and thought. It could be something that's just providing protection from the air and from the sea remotely outside Ukraine. It could be having a trigger force inside Ukraine, providing training and development for Ukrainian forces and relieving them of some of their duties in the east. It could be an air policing task over parts of Ukraine. I suspect nothing will go anywhere near the areas that there's been fighting over, but that would allow the Ukrainians to concentrate their forces even more in those areas. Until our politicians decide, there's very little detail that can be put on design. Military planners will have planned lots of different options so they can present them to the politicians and say, if you look at this option, there's the bill. If you look at that option, there's another bill. If you look at that option, there's another bill. But at the minute, the options are virtually endless. Ukraine knows that it's not going to get an ironclad guarantee. The most ironclad guarantee that there could be is, if there is a peace agreement on the table, is to get the Ukrainian military forces up to a very, very strong level, equipped coherently with your NATO equipment, equipped with more air defense capability, equipped with more modern aircraft, time to build a modern navy, and equipped with more long range missiles, as we're seeing the Ukrainians develop themselves with their new Flamingo 3,000 kilometer long cruise type missile. So that is probably the best way to provide some closer to ironclad than they could guarantee with signatures and a bit of paper from the West. There's no obvious successor to Putin, but a lot of those that are surrounding him are the architects of the war in Ukraine, and have got more hardline views. So they will want to continue this. They will still want to see Ukraine destroyed as a country, it become a puppet state like Belarus, under a wider Russian Federation. They will still want to capture parts of Ukraine, and link up with Transnistria, which is that breakaway part of Moldova. That would be their next step, because it means they're not necessarily attacking a NATO country. So they'll go back for more chunks out of Ukraine if there's a peace deal on the table. Yeah, Putin's not going to agree to all of this. He'll use language that will deflect and obfuscate and suggest that he's got other things that might help us get down the path to what people are describing. So that what all he's doing is he's delaying things politically. He knows that Donald Trump early next year is going to start to be focused on his midterm elections, so he's going to become more domestically focused. He knows Donald Trump's only got another 3 and a bit years in office. And Putin doesn't think in the next election terms. He doesn't think in what the next tweet is going to be or the next newspaper headline is going to be. He can think long term, so he can sit and wait, and if he can delay and obfuscate in the way that he's done successfully so far. Donald Trump threatened him with huge sanctions if he didn't come to the table within 10 days with a peace agreement. Well, within that 10 days, he gets to Alaska. He doesn't come with the peace agreement. It doesn't get signed, and there's no sanctions. And there's no secondary sanctions against those that are buying Russian oil. So from Putin's perspective, he's winning. He's controlling the narrative, and he thinks he can still control Donald Trump, and use that opportunity to try and split this coalition of the willing apart even more. So that's what his tactic's going to be. So no, he's not going to agree anything, and therefore that means that probably nothing is going to happen.